Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters and the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another episode in our fly casting series. And today we have a very special guest. And you know, we get a lot of questions from time to time about casting super large flies. Heavy flies, bulky flies, giant flies. And who better than the originator of the largest flies on the planet than Blane Chocklett himself. So Blane, if you could share with our viewers your tips, tricks for casting these super large game changers like we're throwing here today.
Well, as you know, a lot of people know, Lefty was a big mentor and friend of mine, and you know, I know you knew him as well, and he got a hold of me years ago, and you know, I basically learned fly casting on my own. You know, I didn't have anything, you know, obviously with Flip's show growing up in high school and all that. And then, you know, Flip would always talk about Lefty, and I got Lefty's book that I wanted to know, because he goes, what would Lefty do? And then he would have Lefty on his show, and then I started going to the library back then, because we didn't have Google. We didn't have, you know, the big internet. At least I didn't know about it at that time. And so I got his saltwater book, the iconic saltwater fly fishing book, and it talked about sinking lines and all types of different lines and rods and how you cast them and all that. So that got me really thinking. Got out in the yard, started playing around with them, and finally got to meet Lefty years later. And you know, at that time I felt like I was a pretty accomplished caster, until I got on the South Holston with him at a mutual friend of ours where he was teaching a school, and I was just out there to help, assist him with some of the students. And I was just out there on this dock on the Holston and casting and laying some really nice long casts out, which I thought were good. And Lefty got a hold of me, and he goes, you know what, that's just so inefficient, just in Lefty's way. And I was like, okay. He goes, I want to see you be able to pick up 90 foot of fly line off the water and make a haul and start your cast. I was like, man, I don't think I can do that. He goes, you certainly can do it. He took that rod from me, laid 90 feet of line out there, and picked it all out, hauled it, just like it was nothing. So I'm sitting there trying, and it was basically, and this is getting into the cast. It's basically the way I was pulling up on it, right? To pull that 90 feet of fly line off the water all at once. And what I wasn't realizing at the time, Lefty was pulling the line to him, not up, but to him. And as he gained momentum, he did that quick haul and straightened it out. So he was getting more of a straight line pull instead of an upward pull, which I was trying to create, which basically creates slack, because once it starts coming off the water, your next move is to come like this.
Right.
And that's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
So basically I learned, if you could keep your rod pointing at the target that you're leaving long enough to start generating that momentum and keeping it, it's basically the way I teach it is, if you're talking to a buddy and you got your arm on a bar, say we're at a bar, and you're just talking to him, whatnot, and without moving your body too much, and you're standing right here where the bar is, without spilling a beer, somebody taps you on, you tap me on the shoulder and want me to pass you a beer that the bartender gave me.
It's not very far-fetched.
No, so what happens is you have that beer in your hand, and the best way to do it is like this, right? So that is basically how you do a big fly cast. I pin the rod against my forearm on the side, not underneath, but on the side, and that reduces fatigue, because hours of casting on the water with these large flies, your forearms get tired, that tennis elbow starts coming into play, your shoulders will start hurting. But pinning this rod against your forearm and keeping that straight line and passing your beer without spilling it, see what I'm saying? So it's here, transferred. That's basically how I throw a big fly, and definitely on a back cast. And that back cast is the most important, because you want to make sure it's not dipping. It's more of a straight line.
Right.
And I think you were telling me earlier how Flip would always talk about that.
Yeah.
And basically I'm going to demonstrate this just here and it just goes on out, and it'll go out forever as long as you keep a straight, tight line and don't get a dip in it. Don't spill your beer or spill your drink or your wine or whatever your Coke. That's something that I kind of teaching people and people on my boat. That's one thing that it's kind of registered with them, to be able to there, here, and just watch your thumb. If your thumb's here and not here, you're not spilling it. And as long as you're traveling that straight line, you're generating a lot of line speed. The rod and the line are working together and not against each other, and it just makes the process so much easier.
That's one of the things that we preach is your thumb. I mean, the rod tip and therefore the fly are going to go basically exactly where your thumb points them. And that's what you're saying. If you wind up coming like this and you come back, it's going to dip down, you're going to have slack, it's going to kill you. Yep.
Slack kills, definitely. And the larger the flies are, the more exaggerated your flaws become.
Yes.
So if you have any mistake in your stroke, it gets amplified by tenfold with bigger fly, because you're talking about something that you can see how much water comes out of that fly when you take it, and you make one shake. And with the design of this, I want to minimize the amount of false cast, because if you fill this fly now, it's about a 9-inch game changer.
Yeah.
If you fill it, it's dry. So the more false casts you do, the drier that gets, and that becomes a hindrance. Because if it gets too dry, then it wants to act like a parachute in the air. So I always tell my clients, minimize your cast. So once I pull the fly out of the water, I shoot it, and then I'm ready to go and let it go without wasting casting strokes. Because if it takes you 4 or 5 false casts to get the fly out there, multiply that by how many casts you make in a day or hours. So if I can minimize my false casts to 2 or 3 throughout the day, my arm isn't going to be hurting as bad, right? So that's another thing, is you need to start generating line speed as fast as you can. And the only way you could do that is by doing the correct casting stroke with the haul. And obviously the fly lines that are out there, the rods that are out there, all this stuff is designed to do all that work for us. And that's the one thing I always emphasize on the boat, is make sure you're keeping it on a straight line. You're not trying to cast the rod. You let the rod and the line do the work for you. And it takes a little bit of time. And I tell you what, ladies usually pick it up faster, because us men, we always got to be big and strong. And we think the stronger we are, the farther that rod's going to go, and that line's going to go. And that's not how it works. It's all about the rod and the line and the mathematics that go with it, right? Yeah. So as long as you are keeping it in a straight line and you're not spilling your drink when you pass it, everything's going to work out. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, if I can keep when I start making bad casts throughout the day, it's usually I start overpowering my casting hand and I start dipping it a little bit on the back cast. And once that happens, it's like a golf swing. It's hard to overcome a bad backswing. So it's the same with a fly cast. If you make a bad back cast, Lefty always used to have that saying, you ever watch your back cast? And if somebody would say no, he goes, I don't blame you, I wouldn't either. So that's how he always was, and it was always funny, but it's true. Your back cast is the biggest part of it. Yeah. And learning how to cast a fly with your backhand is probably the most underappreciated part of fly casting. It's huge with big flies, because you get wind direction and changes in wind. Sometimes that's your only option to be able to fish, right? If you got a wind coming into us right here, and we're trying to fish that direction and make a big cast, that wind's pulling that fly into my shoulder and my back. That's a good way to be going to the hospital, right? Yeah. So the only option that you will have is you'll have to cast backhanded. So you're going to release on your backhand, and it's the same deal. Biggest mistake I'll see with clients is they'll come back and they'll try to throw it like this. And that immediately opens everything up, and the cast doesn't work that way. It's here and then here, and everything's staying in a nice tight line and more on a plane. And that's the key to making really good casts, whether you're throwing big flies really or small flies. I mean, that's really the true way to make good, efficient casts.
Don't spill your beer.
Don't spill your beer.
How important, Blane, I know the answer, but tell our folks how important the haul is to you in this cast.
So the importance of the haul, the crucial thing is you need to have your hands together to start the haul. That way, and Lefty always taught that a shorter, crisper stroke was the best way to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're seeing these really long, extreme jerks on the line as you make that haul, but I found that he was correct. If I just do short little strokes and then let it feed, and then I'm ready right here on my back cast, and with a big fly, this is kind of how it looks like. And like yesterday teaching at that school at your shop, I was making sure everybody was here, and as that line uncoils, that's one thing I want to talk about too, is with these big flies, is the biggest problem with it is that transfer over of the energy at the end. When that fly uncoils, you get a big kick because of the mass. And by extending your arm on the back cast instead of stopping here like a lot of fly casts, by extending your arm, that acts as a shock absorber to the rod and the line, so you get less kick over, and kick over creates slack. So if you get kick over with that big fly, it goes this way and then comes back at you with a recoil, and you get immediately about 5 feet of slack. So by hauling and extending your arm and then coming back, and you feel that kick over, it's already loosened up, and it absorbed it, and you're ready with that straight line. And then I turn my body with the haul, and as it comes here, I let it go. And you're getting just the ultimate in pull, bend in your rod. You're feeling it down in here all the way down, and then you're just unloading it at the same time, just a short little pop. And it generates so much line speed. But a crucial part of all that is trying to absorb that shock that you get with the kick over of these big flies. And it's really easy to show you as I pull that water out. Watch what happens with this rod tip as I let you can feel it. You can probably hear it on the mic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Bounce.
See that?
Yeah.
Did you see how it really smacks that rod? But watch what happens when I come back with it. It really softens it. You don't see that at all at that time. So that was something I really learned. The bigger the flies got, the more I had to extend my arm back. And it's not really a powerful extension. It's just extending with that fly uncoiling, and you're timing. And that's all about timing at that point. So you're trying. That's why I always tell people, when you're throwing big flies, it's better off to stand sideways so you could see your back cast. Like Lefty was always saying, you need to watch your back cast so you know what you got going on. And that's the most important part. That way you could figure out what your timing is. And then after you figure it out and you know what that feels like, you don't have to look at it anymore. But having a good open stance allows you to have more of an athletic approach to casting at that point.
Right.
That way when you come forward, you're ready to haul, and you're kind of using your body to help push everything forward as well. And that's how I've been able to do it without having any rotator cuff surgery at this point.
Right. Well, I mean, if you do it right, like you said, it's not at all power. There's just no power. It doesn't take power to throw a big fly like this. It takes the right mechanics, and it takes timing, and then it takes doing a lot of the work with your opposite hand in the haul and pulling that rod, kind of pulling the rod to a stop. But that tip about about absorbing the shock of a big fly like that. I mean, if you make a dry fly cast with a fly like that, boom, it's like you said, that rod tip, as soon as that fly straightens out, or the line straightens out and that fly comes to the end of that part of the cast, I mean, you could see it, you could hear it, the rod tip bouncing.
Yep.
And that's bad. That creates all kinds of slack and sine waves in the line. And when it comes to fly casting, slack is the enemy.
It is.
Slack will kill you. And you know, Flip Pallet teaches something very similar in the fact that And you can kind of do this also with your arm and with your wrist as well. And what Flip talks about is coming back like this, and then as that fly is about to straighten out, you can absorb some of that shock with your wrist as well. And we talk about breaking your wrist at the right time. And what that does in a cast like this, and you've been talking about this all along, is this straight line thing. When you're here and that fly finally basically straightens out, if you can have your rod and the fly line in a straight line to that fly at this point, before you begin this part, if you can, boom, absorb some of that shock with your wrist as well as your arm, like you said, and then everything's in a nice straight line, and if you begin to pull on that fly like this, and you're going in a straight line, and you come here, as Flip often says, if you start from that straight line path and just start to drag that fly forward, you can cast a bowling ball.
Yeah. Once you transfer that energy, it's going to go. And you could not have your fly line attached to your reel, and your fly line would shoot as far out as it until gravity took over and finally loses momentum.
You can do that all day long.
All day.
And your arm doesn't get tired, your shoulder doesn't get tired. Have you ever seen Dahlberg? I remember I was about 19 years old and I did a Cincinnati sport and boat show, and Larry Dahlberg and Dave Whitlock were the guests, were the fly fishing guests. And Dahlberg used to do a thing. You ever seen him do this? He had like a rubber ducky on wheels. Have you ever
Oh
seen,
yeah, oh yeah.
Have you ever seen him do that?
Oh yeah.
And this thing was like this big. Okay, and it's something that you could never ever fly cast, but he would show that exact same thing. He would start with that rod tip pointed straight at the rubber ducky, straight line, and he would go like this and do virtually nothing, and that rubber duck would go across the hull.
Yep.
And everybody was just ooh and ah, but it's the same thing that Flip is saying. If you start with that straight line, so your rod tip is here. So it kind of goes against that conventional, this wisdom. Okay, the cast might be here, but then you're gonna do this to help absorb that shock, get your straight line path, and you're gonna come through. You can throw that bowling ball, or in Larry Dahlberg's case, the rubber ducky on wheels.
Yep.
I'll never forget that.
And that's what we were doing yesterday in the casting class. I was telling everybody to break their cast into two parts. Learn the back cast, and so when they would do their back cast and they got their back cast right and they were extending it out like this, the line should be traveling in that direction, and it should not be coming behind you. If it comes behind you, that means you're opening your cast up and you're casting in an arc.
Yeah.
When you cast it sideways like that, it should be going at that angle away from you. And then I would let it hit the ground. And that's on, get the slack out, strip any slack out because of it hitting the ground. So you have a straight line. Mm-hmm. Now you're ready to do a really good forward haul. And all you have to do is just go here, boom. And that was it. And they were picking it up super quick once they broke the cast into two parts.
Yeah.
And they started understanding how that straight line really makes all the difference in the world, and it truly, truly does.
That's a great way to practice your haul too. Haul, down, haul, lay it down.
Yep.
Well, Blane, thanks, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And so there you have it, friends. 12-inch, 14, what's the biggest game changer there is?
I've tied them up to 17 inches. That's about as big as I've done, and caught fish on it. One of the biggest ones we've ever caught was on one that big.
Nice.
And it also has to do with ambient light and water conditions and all that stuff. The bigger the water, meaning in our river systems, if we have really big, heavy flows from high water, heavy rains, dirty, I want to make a big presence so they can find it easier. Yeah. And that's the only reason. But if I can get away with it, a 9, 8, 10-inch fly is really about right anymore. I've kind of dropped down a little bit in size, and a lot of that's due to pressure.
Yeah.
So I just kind of make it, I let the fish tell me what they want.
That's right. Well, people are always looking at the giant game changer flies that we fish and that we sell, and they always ask, the next question is, how in the world do you cast something like that? So there you go, friends, from the game changer himself. So you can cast very large flies with very little effort. So, as always, friends, thanks for being here. Stay tuned for more episodes on fly casting, and subscribe to our channel. That really helps us out. Hit the like button. That'll make Blane feel really good about this episode, as well as us here at Mad River Outfitters. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned. And oh yeah, be sure to watch this video right there. Blane might be in that one. And then this one right here, it's not the best we've ever done, but it's still a good video.